Hi everyone, thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode on recovery pace. I'm really excited because I have a special guest here today. This is my dad, Steve Spence, and we are going to talk about some recovery pace tips for you. But first, I want to introduce him for those of you who may not know all of the incredible things that he's done. First of all, he coached me from middle school until the end of college and is a huge part of where I am today as an athlete. He's in his 23rd year of being the head coach for cross country at Shippensburg University in Pennsylvania. You had an 11-year pro career, is that right? Okay, where he set 2 American records, 34:19 for the 12K and 42:40 for the 15K. He won the 1992 Olympic Trials Marathon and finished 12th at the Barcelona Games. He is the bronze medalist of the 1991 World Championships Marathon and has a PR of 2:12, which is 5-minute pace. So, I want to talk about the success that we've had. And one of the things that we've kind of been discussing over the past few days is that we've been very successful running fast, but we don't run fast every day. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. But first of all, thank you so much for being willing to do this with me.
Thank you, Neely. It's a great introduction. And I'm delighted to be here and be a part of your YouTube channel. And I've been watching your YouTube videos and you've been doing a great job and a lot of great information. So I'm just thrilled to be a part of that.
Well, thank you. This is going to be a fun one because you're my first ever guest. So I want to start with a story. And this is a story that has inspired me for many years. And I'm just wondering if you can elaborate on it a little bit. So there was a fall where you scratched from the Chicago Marathon. It was very disappointing. And then you rebounded just a couple months later and you went on to have one of the best races of your career. How did you do that?
Yeah, well, I was supposed to run Chicago, and I forget the exact date. It was sometime in mid-October, probably early October.
Yeah.
And I had already, everything was lined up and I was ready to go. And the training was going well. I ran well at the Philly Half Marathon in mid-September. And then after that, the wheels came off. I started having some severe allergy issues. My heart rate was high. I wasn't getting rested. I was, I just got in a state of overtraining. So I ended up ultimately backing out of Chicago because I spent 3 weeks really struggling and wasn't ready to go and perform. And but then as soon as I backed out, my training started really coming around. And during that time when I was struggling, I realized that if I keep going like this, I'm going to be way, way overtrained. So I put on a heart watch and just started running, max of 140 to 150 beats per minute. And the pace was slow. I couldn't run very fast, but it kept me from getting overtrained. I still was able to get the volume in. And then all of a sudden it got really cold. Like we had a serious cold spell in October there where we had a couple weeks where it didn't get above like 35 with lows in the teens. And it changed my allergy situation. And I started feeling much better. So after a few weeks, we started looking around for a race. And my agent, Don Paul, said, hey, what about the US Championships in Columbus, November 11th? And I said, the timing sounds good, yeah. And so we called up and they asked me, we'd love to have you. What number do you want? I said, my lucky number 11. So
it was 11/11, date.
I won Columbus on the 11th day of the 11th month of the 11th running of the Columbus Marathon.
Wow.
Wearing my lucky number 11. So
That's pretty awesome.
But,
it was meant to be.
I think the story to some extent is that sometimes we shouldn't force things, that things are meant to be. We're getting messages. And had I run Chicago and not Columbus, which was the US Championships that year, and that was the qualifier for the World Championships, which were the following, 1991 in Tokyo, and winning that got me a spot on the World Championship team.
And thus got you to the place where you won a medal.
Correct.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think that's such a great story because I was mistaken. I thought it was months and it was weeks. You literally had weeks to reset and you were able to perform. And you hear that time and time again where things aren't clicking, things are kind of feeling forced, and you just listen to your heart rate, let your body kind of settle, get in some long aerobic mileage, and you respond amazingly.
Yep. Yeah, and I think the key there was the heart, monitoring the heart rate so I didn't get into a state of overtraining. So when I did get that relief from the allergies, the fitness was there, and all of a sudden, where before I was running, 7 minutes with 140, heart rate, then all of a sudden I'm running 6 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's just a world of difference. And it was also a barometer to let me know, hey, you're doing better.
Right.
You're feeling better. And then I was able to add the speed work and some final touches on those long runs, and had success.
So adding in that data definitely made a big difference for you with monitoring the heart rate. It doesn't lie. Your heart rate definitely reflects how your body's handling things. So it gives you that information that you needed.
Exactly, and I tend to have like a love-hate relationship with the heart watch.
Yes.
Sometimes I love it when it's telling me what I want it to tell me, and not so much when it's doing the opposite of that.
Correct, but those are often the days when you need it the most. Awesome. So what do you tell your athletes whenever you're suggesting they run on effort, on heart rate, and gauge fitness that way?
Yeah, I tend to work it with the breathing, and I stress if you can get out there, and for me, and some people it's different, but if I can do a 4-4 breathing pattern, I know I'm staying very aerobic. If I can stay with 4-4, if I have to go to a 3-3, then I start to get where that effort would be too great.
Focused effort.
Yeah, the focused effort. So I tend to do that for myself, but each person's different. I know you don't really do 4-4 that well. That's a stretch for you. So yours is more like 3-3.
Right.
Or maybe a 3-4 or something.
Yeah.
Is your aerobic effort. So everybody's different, but you need to know the athlete, and that's a good way to judge effort and pace.
Yeah, that's definitely a YouTube that I should do, is all about breathing and different breathing rhythms and focused, conscious breathing. And while it's something that we all do while we're running, while we're sitting here, it's so important to be in tune with it, and it's something that I've utilized so much in my training and in my races. So that's a really good point, is that if you're not wearing a heart rate monitor, using that 4-4 breathing pattern to really keep your body slow and smooth and in check. I know one of the ways that people often say, how to make sure that you're running very aerobically is that you should be able to have a full conversation while you're running. And so that's another way that you can kind of, gauge that effort. If you can sing Jingle Bells, then you're doing good. Are there any weather factors to consider whenever we're talking about recovery pace? Because we ran in the snow today, right? So I know I was running slower, but I'm working harder.
Yeah, definitely it's more effort based. So if you're focusing on effort, the breathing can be helpful regardless of what surface you're running on. Also we need to take into consideration the wind, the temperature, altitude,
Mm-hmm.
and we're here in Lafayette, Colorado, right outside of Boulder at 5,200 feet or so,
Yep.
and that's a lot different than me running back in Pennsylvania.
Right, at
So
sea level.
at sea level. So I need to take that into consideration, and also what you did the day before,
Mm-hmm.
and what stresses are in your life at that moment as well. With my college kids that I work with, they have a lot of stresses,
Mm-hmm.
and some of them, they might be up late studying, or have papers due or things like that, which cause lack of sleep. They may have other stresses in their lives with personal situations and that we all have, and work situations that definitely need to be taken into consideration. And if you have a coach, that information needs to be communicated to them so that they can make the appropriate adjustments. And or if you're working yourself and more responsible to yourself, making those proper adjustments is very important.
Yeah, that makes so much sense, and I feel like as a mom, I can 100% relate to that. It's like, oh, well, Athens was up 6 times last night, so I might need to readjust my expectations for today's run. And as a coach, I do that too. I'm, trying to gauge what stresses are going on within my athletes' lives, and when they're communicating with me, I can help and support them better by rearranging things, removing a workout and saying, hey, you know what, your body's already stressed, let's just do another easy recovery round, or let's take a day off instead. It's always better to do less and not force anything.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to think about what's coming up as well. If you have a hard workout, a day down the road, the next day, or maybe 2 days down the road, we need to start preparing for those workouts. And maybe do some runs at the slower end of our aerobic range in order to be fresh and ready to go in those workouts so we can give really good efforts.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's definitely important to always be cognizant of what's coming and to recognize that, sometimes, I've been there where like the night before a race, I'm so nervous, I sleep terribly, I wake up, I'm fine. You go out, you run, you get in a great effort. But if you have bad night's sleeps back to back to back, that can really add up, and that can definitely set you back and put you in the hole. Of course we control what we can, and then we kind of have to roll with it. If you wake up on race day and you're not super rested, you just got to see what you can do on that day. But if we're looking at, kind of this recovery pace range that we're talking about, I know you and I both have utilized the Jack Daniels tables, where he kind of provides like, here's, if you're in generally this fitness level, here's about your recovery pace. Do you still use those with coaching?
I do. I use those quite extensively. One of the things I think to realize is that your average pace may be slower than the slower end of that range with the warm-ups and the cool-downs, if you do an appropriate warm-up and cool-down. But the bulk of your run is the middle. If you're running a 10 miler, the first mile might be really easy, the last mile might be really easy, and then that 8 miles in between would be within that range.
Okay.
But your overall average may end up being 10 or 15 seconds per mile slower,
Right.
taking in the warm-up and cool-down.
And that's another great point. People forget to warm up and cool down on easy days, right? Like you warm up and cool down for workouts, but your body is going from 0, sitting, sleeping, whatever, to running. It still needs a warm up.
Yeah, even when I was a young man, I would start off at old man pace, and that first half mile was just a shuffle, and then I'd gradually get into it. And the more that I did that and was diligent with starting off really easy, the better I would feel later in the run.
Okay.
And the better I would recover as well.
That's another great tip. Start off really easy that first mile. I think that's called the Kenyan shuffle, right?
Yeah.
The Kenyans and African runners are known for always starting off really nice and easy, and I can attest. I did a run with Betsy Sena, who is an Olympic medalist, and she was running so slow. I thought I was like walking, and I ended up having a great race that day, but I did my warm-up with her at her super slow Kenyan shuffle pace and turned out great. So as a coach, I too, kind of use those Jack Daniels tables. And one thing I've noticed is if I kind of use his recommendation and make the pace range about 90 seconds, that seems to do the trick for accommodating that slower warm up and cool down. So for example, if your easy recovery run is 8-minute pace, I would make that range probably like a 7:45 to a 9:15. And so you can start off at your 9:15, you gradually work into it, and then maybe you get into that 8-minute to 7:45 range, and then you would cool down at that, 8:30 to 9:15 pace. And so if you guys are trying to figure out what your recovery pace is, I think it's really beneficial to, one, take into consideration getting a heart rate monitor and having that data to provide feedback. Everyone's heart rate's a little bit different, so you have to figure out what is your aerobic range, but often around that 140 is kind of that recommended aerobic pace. And so that can give you an idea of where your easy recovery aerobic range should be, is around that 140 beats per minute with the heart rate. And then utilize your breathing and allow that to help you gauge effort, especially in bad footing, challenging weather, at altitude, if you're not feeling great. All of those are going to play into your heart rate being higher at the same pace, so you'll have to slow down to keep that effort the same. And then also knowing your current fitness, recognizing, hey, where I am today may not be where I want to be at the end of my season, but if I train like where I want to be at the end of my season, I'm going to be overtraining. So I need to take into consideration where my fitness is now, where my training needs to be right now, and kind of chip away at that progress to get to where I want to go.
Yeah, that's a good point with the current fitness and knowing where you are. That's important. It's always important to know what your fitness is and what you're capable of doing in training, and especially on race day.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, that was really fun. We should do this again. Thank you so much for joining, and thank you guys for listening today. Really appreciate it, and I look forward to bringing you more content. But cheers, and have a great Christmas holiday.
Yeah, thank you, Neely.
You're welcome.
And I do want to point out that I am wearing a T-Rex Santa Claus shirt.
Yes.
And again, thank you for allowing me to be with you on your YouTube channel. It was a lot of fun.
Well,
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, everyone. And yes, thank you for enjoying our ugly sweaters.